Hi, and welcome to this Hood Community Q&A session with myself, Andrew, and my good friend and senior game designer on Hood, Erich Cooper. And we're going to run through some of the questions that you've been submitting on Discord and hopefully answer them as honestly as we can for you and just give you a state of play where we're at the minute and looking into the future for Hood. So I'll hand over to you, Erich, for the first question.
Cool, thank you. So we've got a first set of questions that are around custom lobbies, spectator modes, and replays. So custom lobbies is something that we've already designed and is something that we would love to do. We've got plans in place for it, where we want to basically allow you guys to tune AI difficulty, map selection, and just play with your friends how you want to play. When it comes to spectators, we're looking at using the ghost system that we used for state heists for when you drop the talismans, so you can kind of go in there and kind of watch what people are doing. And then as for replays and stuff, that isn't something that's on our radar, but with all these features, you know, they're quite expensive to develop. So it's largely based on how Season 3 goes and if we get an uptake in player base.
Cool. Cheers, Erich. Next set of questions I've got, I'll try and group these together. What are the longer term plans for the game with regards to keeping the servers going, future development, marketing? Will there be a relaunch? What are the long term plans for Hood as a service product? Will there be an advertising relaunch? What are there still plans to carry on and keep developing? Something we'd like to know as content creators for the game is, you know, are there going to be any further support for them from the developers? So, I mean, there's quite a few things to bunch in there. Obviously, yes, we want to continue working on the game. You know, we love the game that we created. We're very proud of it. And yes, there is a desire to keep adding content to it, but that's got to be driven by a business need. You know, that's the reality. And in terms of content creator support, yes, we are interested. You know, we will happy to provide people with codes for the game for themselves, for their community, to grow that community. You shouldn't expect like a massive marketing push on this front. However, we will have some significant news to share towards the end of the month, which is pretty exciting. Okay, over to you, Erich.
Cool, yeah, so there's a really good question here. Is there any chance of the voice actors playing the game? And obviously that would be an absolutely amazing idea. I think that's a great idea for a dev stream. And it's something that we can ask them. Maybe we could do like the voice actors versus the devs or something like that. But if we do release them into the wild, you've got to take it easy on them because you guys are pretty amazing at the game. And, you know, they're kind of more newer players. So we don't want them to get absolutely ruffle-stomped.
I think we've joked for a while about, you know, the sheriff appearing because Guy, who I know very well, he would do a good job. I'm not sure he's a hardcore gamer, but he's definitely a hardcore swearer. He would turn up and have some fun.
Definitely scare you if you're running around, right?
Absolutely. So the next one I've got is it possible to revert certain changes to a previous state? For example, John's light attacks have been buggy and inconsistent since Season 1 patch with an animation lock for simply doing a 3-swing combo. Will you guys fix the Robin aim to make arrows come from the center of the character to avoid head glitching? With all of these things, just report any issues you have, and then we investigate it, we look into it, and we match that up with like, you know, player data with server data to see if changes are actually required. The, you know, aiming, the head glitching, that was a huge conversation that we had throughout development. I think we're in a good place. You know, we created a system which minimizes that. But, you know, if you've got thoughts on that, you know, send them in. But we need to have a few of those thoughts for it to gather enough momentum to then be backed up by data before we make any changes.
Cool. So the next one I've got a few questions based on what happens after Season 3, what's the future of Hood and all that kind of thing. And, you know, we'll continue to do balance tweaks and that kind of stuff and like balances, bug fixes. But to be honest, when it comes to new content after Season 3, it's really a question of seeing what the player data is like. Have we got, you know, enough people playing the game for us to actually invest in content? Because obviously we've got loads of plans of what we would like to do, but it's costly and we need the player numbers to justify it.
Absolutely. Next one I've got is around PvP. So currently a new player has no shot in PvP. as they do not have any perks that the other players might have. Current matchmaking system works as intended, but there's no player base to support it. A new player is a sheep in a wolf's den. Is this something you guys keep in mind? And if so, are there any solutions to this? Yeah, I mean, obviously we are bearing this in mind. The flip side of the coin is, not getting into a PvP match at all, and that is something which hopefully as server populations become more healthy, becomes less of a problem. And while, stomping is less than ideal, it is better to get into a match rather than to be sat waiting in a lobby. One thing you guys are particularly good at, and we've seen this a lot of times on the forum, is community rallying behind when new players come online. So rather than noob stomping, you're taking people under your wing and kind of tutorializing them, getting them up to speed, and getting them involved before knocking your arrows too harshly on their heads. And that's something to bear in mind. When season 3 arrives, our advice to new players is still to try the state heists. To get used to the mechanics in PvE and build up some experience and build up some perks. So all of those perks that you unlock, as we say, in PvP are available in PvE as well. So it's the same progression. So you can go into PvP equipped. And also, I think with a good team, the perks aren't everything. They were never balanced to be min-maxing, so they will give you a little bit of a gameplay advantage, but it's not much. And bringing a new player online and keeping them under your wing for a couple of games is probably the best thing in that scenario.
Nice one. So I've got a few questions about what can players do after they hit the level cap? Have we got any plans of prestige system and things like that? And 100% hot topic. It's been in house since we launched season 1. Is a prestige system is something that we definitely love to do. But again, it's where do we spend the money, and it's what does the community want, and it's all based on how season 3 goes and kind of the uptake of players. It probably sound like a bit of a broken record, but we all want to do this sort of stuff, but it also just boils down to sort of where we invest the money.
Yeah, cool. Next one I've got here is there any news of the game going to Game Pass for Xbox? Why haven't you put the game on Game Pass on Xbox yet? Quite simply, it's not as easy as just putting a game on Game Pass. There are business considerations. There's even a submission process with Microsoft and Xbox itself to get onto Game Pass. Obviously, there's a huge desire to reach new players, but we don't have any news to share on specifically that platform at this time.
Following on from that question, Eddie, there's also a couple of questions on, so what are their plans to bring more players and people like advertising, free to play and that kind of stuff. There are plans in the works and we can reveal more information soon. So just keep tuned. We've got some exciting news coming soon.
Was that your winky
I think that
face?
was a winky face, yeah.
I saw a winky face. Oh, cool. Will there finally be a ranked mode? Will you ever get a ranked mode? Based on the current winch mechanic, it's competitive. With some minor tweaks, it could be made less RGN based. Yeah, I mean, ranked mode, yeah, it's another feature that's entirely justified with a larger player base. And of course, there is a desire and a design for this. We've had designs for ranked modes and all kinds of spectator tools from day one. But right now, the last thing we need is, to separate our active outlaws and hinder the matchmaking in any way. But, with greater success comes a greater expansive range of features, such as ranked mode.
Keeping on the features theme, there's a lot of questions to do with like gold. So can we have some more stuff to spend gold on? There's not enough for me to spend my gold on. Can we have some more cosmetics and stuff? Is there anything in the works for that sort of stuff? And the honest answer is not at the moment. There's nothing coming soon. There's just the season 3 content with the battle pass. But as Andy says, we've got designs based on like cool skins that we'd like, to invest in you and other gold sinks. It's just, it all goes back to where we want to spend the money and the player base. Would you prefer gold skins, or do we give you a spectator mode or a ranked mode? It's where we decide what features work and how we want to do them.
Cool, cheers. Got a question here about how will you keep players engaged and get new players to join, new characters, mechanics and game modes. Yeah, and again, the broken record comes out. It's entirely driven by the success of Season 3. We do have many character and game mode ideas that we'd love to develop. We actually started the whole process of Hood with 9 characters initially. So when we started concepting for Hood, we had 9. And these were iterated down to 5 that represented the most diverse kind of play styles that we wanted in the game right now. And of course, there's always room for more. And I think there's another question later on that touches on this as well, which I'll go into.
So another good question is what happens with community events? So you'll be pleased to know that the Survive the Estate event will be coming back in Season 3, and there's also discussions about bringing back previous events that we've done, so you can kind of get the skins that you missed out on those limited time events. So rerunning some of those events so you can get the skins that you missed out on.
Cool. Further to that, we've got one which is, are there any plans on adding more to the hideout, such as a new training dummy skins or a different look to, spruce things up as you level up in the hideout? There's currently nothing. Again, at some point in the future, I'd love to, publish some of the, the unused concept art. We had grand plans for how we would evolve the hideout early on in development. Starting from kind of, a campfire to something which looked more like a campsite as you gain more wealth and, more elaborate kind of training facilities and obstacle courses and fun stuff like that. And it's just part of development, really. You have to cut your cloth accordingly. So there are lots of cut features and cut designs, which yes, of course, we'd love to reintroduce if success comes our way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. With the hideout, I remember some of the plans we had. But moving on to Ida.
Hide and seek.
Yes, we had a great hide and seek mini game planned. Oh man, that brings back memories. Anyway, on to the Ida question. So there's plans for balance for Ida in Season 3. So we have done a pass on Ida for Season 3, and we're waiting for you to get your hands on it, and then you can, we're quite happy with where she's at in-house. But as always, going forward, we'll keep an eye on the feedback, we'll keep an eye on the data. So if there is any more kind of, notes and feedback and bugs that you guys have got, we'll take a look at it and we'll do what we can.
Cool. And further to that, if the game were to add perks, what perks would you want to see added to the game? We discussed adding a new perk slot. We also had a design suggested by Kier, I think it was, you might be aware of, you've probably played them online, for a perk system called Synergy Perks, which is really interesting, which would allow you to equip perks which synergize with your teammates to encourage team play further. So giving an example of that might be, if you had 2 Idas and you placed your shields next to each other, they would combine to create a bigger shield, which we could call the Great Wall or something. So there's lots of cool designs about how those perks could be synergized. But yeah. Time.
That record, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, you've got one we can answer.
I can, yeah.
Oh,
we've got a lot of questions about crossplay and cross-platform invites. So you'll be pleased to know that Season 3 will launch with a crossplay and cross-invite system. So you'll be able to play with all your friends from different platforms, and as soon as Season 3 launches.
Cool. As we're saying, we were cross-play from day one across all of the supported platforms. It's just the invitation process that took the time, and there's a number of reasons why it took so long, which I'm not going to bore you with in this video. So do you plan to keep on growing your team anytime soon? Maybe a little bit more technical, but what are the requirements to join? Yeah, Sumo Newcastle has significant expansion plans this year. We are building the studio. You can see all of the current vacancies on Sumo Digital's homepage under careers, and that'll give you more information about, what's required for each of those roles, depending on the job discipline that you're interested in.
Nice. So for me, the next question is kind of like, what can the community do to help us? So it's with the current size of the development team, is there anything the community can do to help? Like examples of like testing and things like that. And I think we touched on it a bit earlier, but the biggest thing you can do is keep on doing what you're doing, reporting bugs, reporting issues, reaching out on the forums, on Discord, that kind of stuff. And when we get new players in, teach them a ropes, help them out, don't ruffle stomp them, and then they'll stay, and hopefully we can build a bigger community and get more influx of players, which then will hopefully drive more features that we can get into the game to get your guys' hands on.
Cool. Quick one from me next. Are there any plans on adding very expensive skins so players with hundreds of thousands of gold can use some of their reserves? Again, something we're looking into. We've got ideas. Let's see what happens in season 3. Nice one for you,
exactly. So keeping on the skins thing, obviously there's a couple of questions of asking if we can implement some of the most wanted and requested community skins, and if we can get those in. They won't be dropping for season 3, but it's definitely something that we can look at in the future. But for me, if we were to add skins, I would want the Disney Robin Hood ones. So you've got Robin as a fox, John as a bear, that kind of thing. I think that would be super cool, but I'm not sure if Disney would allow it.
Might get in touch with Ubisoft, see if we can steal Sam Fisher, the special, historically accurate Sam Fisher in Sherwood. So I've got another one here. Speaking of stealth, I would personally love to see a new assassin stealth character added to the game. Is there any information or ideas of future heroes for the game? Yeah, but we have several ideas and designs for future heroes, as I mentioned before. One of those was actually for a spy, an infiltrator. We also had a design, quite an elaborate design for a trapper character as well. I think one of the ones that was most popular is the idea of a master of disguises. Throughout development, there's something really interesting about the idea of having a character that could almost take on one of the state and their properties as well. So you could control a knight or control a sentry. So there's lots of interesting design fruit there that we could dive into if we get the time. Right, cool. So I think that's probably most of the big ones. There's a couple of silly ones. I'm not going to lie, we're not going to answer those. That's pretty much all the questions we got. We'll try and keep on top of this. We'll try and do another one of these as well when we get the time. So just really remains to say, huge thanks from myself and Erich and the whole team here at Sumo Newcastle for your continued support and engagement. There's been some incredibly creative content recently, from Hood News, Mr. Z, to Hood fan fictions, which people send me quite regularly, which are awesome reads, character designs and game mode suggestions. And it is genuinely super interesting to see and really heartwarming when we read this stuff. So thanks for joining us today, and here's hoping for a successful launch for season 3, and we'll chat to you again real soon.
Thanks everyone.
Bye for now.